welcome to the FeelGoodCo's Future Now panel. My name is Jill Williams and I am an organisational psychologist with the FeelGoodCo, and I am delighted to be your host today and to be in conversation with three leaders from a range of industries to talk about one of the most fascinating challenges we have as L&D, HR, OD and people professionals at the moment. We're going to be talking about what does the future of work really mean for leadership, culture and well-being over the course of the next hour. We know from you let us know that up to, I think it was 89% of you are saying that your current priority is to think about how you can really build a new way of working in a hybrid world that will put well-being at the core of your culture. You also told us, about 80% of you told us that leadership development is one of your biggest priorities for what's ahead in the next 6, 12, 18 months as we redefine what it means to work at the moment. So we're going to be touching upon those things today, amongst others. We'll be exploring how we can really embrace this challenge we have and use the learning, not just from the last 12 months, but from the last several years around what's working and what's not working in our organizations to build truly people-first cultures as we move forward. I personally think it's one of the most exciting, most interesting and stretching challenges that I've definitely worked on in recent years in my career. This is a chance for us not to just to lift and transplant the way we've worked remotely or the way we used to work in offices into a hybrid world, but instead to be creative, to be innovative and really put people at the heart of how we reinvent how we work. How do we really reset and refresh work so that it is something that is life enhancing and doing more good in the world? So I'm dying to hear all of our panelists' opinions on this as we go throughout the day. So I am joined today, and I'll invite our panelists to introduce themselves ever so shortly, but I'm joined by Nathalie, Lancia, who is the Learning and Development Director globally within the Publicis Group. I'm joined by Laura Lucas, who is the Leadership Development and Talent Manager for Sopra Steria UK, and Monica Stancu, who is the Diversity and Inclusion and Wellbeing Manager at Lloyds. So we're going to hear lots from them across today. At our last panel, you told us that you really got so much from hearing from our speakers from Sopra Steria and BNY Mellon. So that's why today's panel is really focused on that. We want this to be a session that is peer-to-peer sharing, peer-to-peer learning, and a chance for organizations to lift the lid and learn from each other, because that's where great things happen. And I know, being a people professional myself and having worked in-house in HR roles, sometimes when things are just going, it can be hard to take a pause and actually to network and hear what others are doing across the industry. So we really want this to be your forum today. And as a result, we want you to ask as many questions as possible. I've got some up my sleeve for our panelists already, but I know that there's lots that you want to explore amongst this group. So please keep the questions coming, either through the chat function or through the Q&A tab at the top bar. If we don't get through all questions that are asked today, we'll make sure that we're sharing those on social media and crowdsourcing lots of answers. If, when you're submitting your question, you would be interested in coming live, turning your video on and sharing the question with us verbally, do let us know. Just say live at the end of your question. We'll invite a few of you, hopefully across the day, to come and engage in the conversation with us, and others will run through the questions as well. So keep them coming across the day. So let's turn to this debate, the biggest debate we have at the moment, hybrid working, and what does the future of work look like? There's lots of different ideas out there and lots of different opinions. But before we dive into those, I'd like to invite each of our panelists just to have an opportunity to introduce themselves, let the audience know a little bit about them and their role. Nathalie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Nathalie. Thank you, Jill, for having us. This is really a great opportunity to hear from other companies and leaders about what they're doing in this space. So thank you again for inviting me. So as you can now find out, I'm French, given my accent. So I work for Publicis, which is a French advertising company. And for Publicis, I lead international L&D. So I'm responsible for their global trainings around the world. And especially this year, I'm working on 2 leadership development programs for our people. And so thinking a lot about those topics of future working and how do you really equip our leaders for this new world of work, which is why I immediately said yes to Jill when she invited me to this panel. So I hope I can share a few interesting bits and pieces with you and also learn from the others on this panel.
Lovely. Thank you, Natalie. It's great to have you here. And I know there's some other professionals from the advertising industry on the call as well, so I'm sure they'll be particularly interested in your insight. That's great. Thank you. And Laura, would you like to share a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Laura Lucas. I look after leadership development and talent at Sopra Steria. Sopra Steria is also a French-owned company, so we have French companies on the panel today. I have been looking after leadership development and talent for just over a year now. Funnily enough, I moved into the role just as the pandemic hit, so that was an interesting time to move into a new role. On my agenda over the last 12 months, a big subject for me has been the leadership development side of things. And actually we rolled out a leadership development program for almost 800 of our leaders last year. So look forward to telling you a little bit more about that later on in the session today.
Really great. Thanks, Laura. And I know there was lots of great learnings that I think would be of benefit to everyone from that leadership program. So it'd be great for you to share that. Thank you. And Monica, last but by no means least, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Monica Stancu. I'm Romanian as well, as you can maybe hear in my accent. I lead the internal diversity, inclusion, and well-being agenda at Lloyds. I've just started a few weeks ago, and so far I'm loving it. So I lead this work both in the UK and globally, which is interesting to look at how these topics are sort of perceived in different parts of the world as well. And previously, I led the internal diversity and inclusion work at the Royal Academy of Engineering here in London.
Fantastic. Welcome. Thank you, Monica. And I'm sure that you've got lots of personal reflections on what it's like to transition role during a pandemic and during working remotely, something we hear a lot about from our clients at the moment. As Monica has touched upon there, we have both a UK mindset, but also an international mindset on this panel today. So we'll be really looking to learn across cultures, across organizations, across countries within that as well. And there will definitely be some topics we want to dive into in more depth, such as diversity and inclusion, and maybe some of the risks that potentially a hybrid working model brings to that. So great to have all 3 of you here. So let's start by exploring this idea of difference. What we notice in our work with our clients at the FeelGoodCo is that there's a lot of different opinions out there right now. Some organizations are really clear in their stance and saying, no, we are not embracing virtual or hybrid working. We're going back to the office. We've seen that very publicly with Goldman Sachs. Others are saying, we're going to explore this. We're going to experiment. We're going to try this out and see how we can use this as a chance to bring greater flexibility, maybe remove some of the hierarchy, remove some of the formal aspects of our culture, and instead find a way of working that works for our employees. And we're going to embrace some hybrid working, such as the HSBC is getting rid of offices for senior leaders, reducing their footprint of office space as well across London. And some people are going fully virtual and thinking about how they can really just continue as they have been. So there doesn't seem to be an obvious right answer. There's going to be different things for different organizations. And at Feel Good, we're great proponents of really thinking about individual differences for employees as well. So how do you balance all of this? Understanding what's right for your type of business with its strategy, its needs, its clients, its marketplace, and recognizing that different employees are going to want different things. How do you deal with this tension and find a way forward in the great hybrid working debate? Laura, I'd love to come to you first to hear how you're addressing this at Sopra Steria.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to say we're quite a complex business. Jill will know that from working with us now for a number of months. And actually, I think, you know, when the pandemic hit last year, you know, we had some areas of the business that were very used to working virtually. Actually, that's the way of working that they've been working for a while, and they were used to it. Other areas of our business, not at all. And we had to mobilize a workforce pretty much overnight to be office-based, to being at home. So it was a massive, massive change for us. You know, I think in terms of sort of where we go forward with this, we've been, I think, all the way through the pandemic, and what I've really noticed has changed for us as a business is we've been so people-centric. People have been at the heart of everything that we've been doing and every decision that we've been making, and we've been talking about that, you know, first and foremost at the forefront of all of the communications that we've been doing. And I think in terms of sort of how we move forward with this and how we make sure that everybody's needs and etc. are thought of and considered, it's about continuing to keep people involved, collaborating with people as we go through and learning as we're going, because this is really very new to us. And we are moving to more of a hybrid approach, but actually we've got accounts where they won't be able to work from home. So, you know, actually it's not going to be a one size fits all for our business. So I think what we've really, really focused on is making sure that people know that they're part of this journey. We're all going through this together, and that actually we want to keep talking. We want to keep a dialogue going, and make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And if we need to, you know, double back on perhaps something and change a direction because it's not quite working, then we need people to be willing and open to talk to us about that, because we're all learning a little bit in this, aren't we, at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important, as you say, about keeping that dialogue open and just having that learner's mindset and recognizing that, okay, we're going to make mistakes like we all did in the last 12 months, but how do we listen to what those experiences are? How do we learn from them? And letting the organization know that we're listening and we're learning is so important. Absolutely. You touched upon something there around, you know, not everyone is going to be able to work from home. There's so many different types of roles in Sopra Steria, but also in so many organizations. And I know one or two of you have mentioned this in the chat to me already, is we're not always guaranteed that people will work from home or be able to work from home because of the nature of their role. And it was making me think about creativity and about Publicis, Nathalie. What are your views on this in terms of how you meet the creative needs of perhaps creative teams needing to come together, but also recognizing there's going to be some people who want flexibility, who want home-based work? How are you approaching this?
Yeah, this has definitely been a tough one for us, because creativity is at the core of our business for sure. So it's about how do we keep that. And I think our CEO made quite some lines in the press about how he said that Publicis is never going to be a 100% Zoom company. It's something that was very clear for him right from the start. And I think the debate for us is maybe not as much about the office as a physical space, but it's more about how do we gather people? It's about meeting together. So it's not so much, again, about the office as a physical space, but it's about how do we find space for us to collaborate again, to do our brainstorms. You know, the world of creative is all about brainstorms, and you go in the room and there's like whiteboards and post-it notes. So you need that kind of interaction to happen in some space together. So we've been really looking at how can we do that? So how do we redesign basically the space so that it enables this type of interactions even more? So I guess similar a bit to what Laura was saying, we are getting rid more and more of like closed office spaces, because we realize that the kind of work that one can do in a closed office, one can actually do it from home, right? But like when you are coming to the office, this is where you're going to collaborate. You're making a conscious effort to come to the office because you want to collaborate. So don't go into your office and close the door, but go outside in our hot desking area, in the lounge areas, and yeah, talk with your peers, talk with colleagues, and work there. So the office for us is always going to be the anchor of our business. But we are looking at ways to make it more inspiring and more collaborative, so that people really want to come back to the office. That's really what we would like to create as an environment.
Absolutely. I think that role of the environment and understanding why people need to come together for that collaboration, for that creativity, as you're both saying, is so important. It's very much about purposeful design of interaction and really thinking about how do humans connect in that sense. And I am going to come back to that topic ever so slightly shortly. But first, Monica, I'd love to hear, how are you addressing this at Lloyds, first of all?
So I think for us, from what I've noticed since I've joined a few weeks ago, Lloyd is very relationship driven, like a lot of organizations, but at the same time, they understand that, there are benefits to working from home and there are benefits to working from the office. There are things that you can do much better at home, when you're working on a presentation, when you're writing emails, doing actions, etc. And then there's some things that are better suited for the office environment. Like you were saying earlier, the collaboration piece. So for us is the approach, I think, moving forward will be, when we'll be in the office, it will be for a purpose. So I'm not going to travel 2-3 hours a day just to sit at my desk and write emails. I can do that quite well at home as well. So the approach for us, it will be hybrid as of June. So people will come in the office for about 2-3 days a week. And then the rest that will be working from home, but that's optional. So people can flex as they want.
And how did you, or perhaps being new, you might not know, but how did you reach that decision in terms of what was optional, what wasn't, and what degree of choice and control people could have over where they worked, how they worked, and so on?
So I think there were discussions at I don't know all the details for it, but I know there was a survey that was sent out to all employees to ask them about, how they've been feeling during this period, what they want to see moving forward. And then there were discussions with the leadership team as well. So the future is hybrid for Lloyds as well as for many other organizations. What I want to stress that even though for some organizations this is something new, there are a lot of organizations that have been doing remote work completely, remote working or hybrid working well before the pandemic. And it has served them well because when this crisis hit, they were in a position where they could actually adapt very well and not waste any time being in crisis mode. They could just go on doing what they needed to do without any other stresses.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. It's great to hear that element of listening. And I think for me, something I've definitely observed is that this element of we're actually asking people, we're paying attention to what they need, to how they can do their best work. How does their work and life reintegrate now the world is starting to open up, or at least in the UK, the world is opening up. I know different countries, different perspectives, and I think it's fantastic to actually give people a sense of agency over how they're choosing to work within this. We've definitely touched upon a thought-provoking piece here around people who cannot work remotely, cannot have this choice. They can't find a hybrid pattern that works for them. And I've got two questions that come in. One is using the example of manufacturing. So I think linking back to what you were saying, Laura, around they're tied to particular ways of working, so they have to stay at home. And the question here is, how do you recommend not creating two classes of employees and having a cultural division between those who can embrace hybrid working and those who can't? And then I'm going to ask both these questions at once. And then the follow-on question is, how has the message landed to colleagues who aren't suitable for hybrid working, who are going to have to continue to be there physically and be present physically? So Laura, I'll come to you with that first.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the roles for us where they're unable to work from home, the roles are clearly not going to enable them to do that. So to give you a couple of examples, one of our big client contracts is UKVI. So we have actually people on the front line who are dealing with people's passports and documentation, etc., which they just would not be able to do at home. Or we may have facilities and office managers, for example, who, really do need to be in the office environment. So I think the first thing I would say about that is people within those roles, I think would absolutely understand that because of the nature of the work that they do, that working from home just isn't an option. I think that one thing that we have done is throughout, a lot of our roles have moved to working from home, but we've been trying to make sure that those people who haven't been working from home through a lot of the pandemic, because their roles haven't enabled them to do so, haven't been forgotten. So actually in our comms, a few times over the last year, we've called out those people that have continued to do a role where actually they are going day in, day out to the office on a daily basis, when actually the majority of the workforce is at home. So I think, number one, it's important that we've done that, and we've made it, very clear that we are very grateful for them doing that. I think in terms of how we make sure that we don't create a sort of us versus them or whatever mentality, I think it's just making sure that, okay, you've got a role that requires you to be in an office or be in a place of work, but actually around that they still have access to all the same benefits that other employees would do, the flexibility, and making sure they've got access to the same learning opportunities, the same options for growth, etc., and they're not forgotten in any way. And I would say this because of my role, but it's recognizing that the role the leaders have to play in making sure that those individuals are really felt valued and looked after. But as I say, I think some of it is to do with the fact that actually they are in a role which they know themselves as an employee. It's just not possible to do that role from home. You can't be looking at someone's passport documentation or whatever at home. You just can't.
There's something in what you're saying about making people feel valued for the type of work they're doing, help them connect with that sense of purpose and their professional pride, because actually I want to continue doing this work, and to do it well, we need to come together and need to physically be there. But also I love what you were saying, around give them access to all the same benefits. Yes, they might have to go into the office, but they can still have flexibility. They can still have all of the other great things that come with a hybrid lifestyle, but they're going to just look a little bit different. But really inclusively treat them equally, I think, is so important. I'm going to come back to that point about the role of a leader as well. We've got lots to discuss there, I think. Nathalie, what would you add to that in terms of really making sure the us versus them culture doesn't happen, or people who maybe want to keep some flexibility but are in highly creative roles and are going to need to go in for that collaboration that you talked about really regularly? How are you managing that message with them?
So I guess we are still very early at the stages of this issue, because most of our offices still haven't really reopened, like even our UK one actually. So we haven't actually came across, I guess, this issue so much so far. But I guess what we're going to be doing is, again, going back to this idea, to this message that our CEO broadcasted, which is creativity is at the core of our business, and we are never going to be 100% Zoom company. So it's about finding creativity and collaboration where it happens, which is in our case, the office. So obviously, I guess what our leaders have realized is that they need to be more empathetic and listening to what people are going through, because as you were saying, everyone is going through different stages, and I really hope that they're going to make a conscious effort when they're actually going to come back to the office to really integrate both populations, both the ones that have to stay, well, can stay home, and the ones that are going back to the office, like the new business teams and the producers, all those ones. I think that I can definitely see a change happening, because we used to have very flexible, work policies already. But some managers were struggling a little bit with integrating, I guess, both aspects. So I'm really hopeful that now, with 1 year in, once they really experienced it, that they're going to make a conscious effort when they're going to come back to the office to really include, those that chose or had to stay home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've a couple of very specific words that you've used there that really stood out and spoke to me. This idea about conscious effort and about empathetic leaders, really the importance of that this could all happen. It could just happen, and we kind of muddle through it and we do an okay job. Or we can actually deliberately and consciously choose to think about how we make it work, and how we include people, how we involve them, how we avoid that us-them culture that Laura was talking about. And I think the role of a leader, you've both touched upon there, is so crucial to that. And I know, Nathalie, you've just launched a new leadership development program just beginning of this week. Love to hear more about how you're preparing your leaders to be these empathetic listeners, to deal with this and to create those environments that foster that creativity and collaboration?
Yeah, so yeah, we kicked off our program on Monday, and I'm very excited actually for how it launched. I think we really kicked off with a bang. We had a panel of leaders from different regions come to that kickoff. And what was interesting is that each of them shared their perspective, which actually was very different from one person to the other. But what they had in common was authenticity and vulnerability. I think it was so inspiring for our future leaders to see those senior leaders suddenly being, looking actually so vulnerable and talking about their struggle, how they struggled, the past year, dealing with, obviously with people burning out and with clients like demanding more and more. So they really opened up, I think, to that, and our participants really connected well with those stories, and because I think it really made the leaders feel very personal and human in a way that maybe they didn't look before. Again, not in a conscious way anyway. So I'm really happy because we didn't give them any kind of brief, kind of specific. We just said, share with us your view on how this year has been and how our future leaders can improve their leadership skills. And they all very authentically and honestly came to the table with ideas of active listening, being empathetic, listening for the unsaid. I thought that was really powerful. That was coming from a leader from China. So I think, having those leaders that are very top and that are suddenly becoming really more open to everyone and very vulnerable, I think really helps in kind of shifting the mindset and shifting the conversation around the network. So it's being done in a very organic way for us. I guess I don't have like a secret sauce. Obviously in the program, we have resilience workshops, we have change management workshops, all the building trust, we have all of those. But I must say that I think the balance also of having those personal leader stories come to the table is really equally as important in this program.
Absolutely. Laura, I see you smiling because I think this resonates with a lot of the work that you're doing with your leaders as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of wish I was back at the start of the journey again, actually. I feel like we've kind of come through a lot of it. So good luck with your program.
Yeah, I think we're really demanding something different of leaders, and we're demanding that they're empathetic, they're compassionate, that they are vulnerable, that they show their whole selves. They talk about their struggles, they create that open dialogue to build that safety and trust that you've mentioned there, Nathalie. Absolutely. And from your experience, Laura, because I know you've been focusing on this a lot in the last 10 months, what do you think is most effective in helping leaders develop these things that definitely are not soft skills, they're actually like the really hard skills? How do you help them become more authentic, more vulnerable, more empathetic? What have been your biggest lessons this year?
Good question. Yeah, I think firstly, as I said already, we launched a leadership program, gosh, was it August last year, for sort of 800 of our leaders. But we were really, really cognizant of the fact of how busy everybody was at that time, particularly our leaders and our managers. So the style that we had in terms of the program was that we would come together for an hour's webinar sort of every couple of weeks over the course of however many months it was in the end. So I think firstly, just actually that hour of enabling our leaders to come away from their day job, to come up and out of the detail of what they're dealing with, and really just try and connect with the topics we were talking about. So there was a lot in there about well-being, authenticity, change, how we lead remotely, and really getting them to think about these from a sort of theoretical perspective. And Jill facilitated a number of those sessions and was really great in getting them to really think about how they present and I guess lean in as leaders within the workforce. So I think the first thing is absolutely just giving them that time and space to sort of, come away from what they're doing and really, really think about it. I think for me, a couple of things that we've done that have worked really well. I think, and I saw there's a question in the Q&A around trust. I think, for me, one of the things that we noticed really quickly was that amongst our workforce it was almost like people were seeking permission with some of this being at home and what they were allowed to do, and felt like actually they had to be online like you know, all day, every day, because, you know, they needed that little green light and they needed to be seen. So one thing that we've done for all of our employees, but I think it's supported our leaders, is that we've launched last year a communication campaign, which is called It's Okay. And there's loads of different elements to that. So for example, with the remote side of things, it's okay to go offline. It's okay to schedule a lunch break. It's okay to schedule time to exercise. And then I think from a leader perspective, what's really made the impact is where they then role model those things. So actually part of the program that we had, we ran a number of Q&A sessions where we invited our executive onto the sessions. And some of the most powerful points were where they were able to say, I block out an hour for lunch every day. Actually, I mean, our CEO, I can't remember exactly what it was, Jill, but I think it was something along the lines of, I bought a rowing machine and actually I'm booking in the time, you know, wherever possible to come away from my computer and concentrate on that. And actually, I think just them role modeling and showing that they're doing it is just so, so important and so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've seen that across a number of different organizations, that when people were given the flexibility of working remotely for the first time, there was so much stress, there was so much pressure on everyone. It's the beginning of a pandemic. We were seeing, you know, experiencing things we'd never experienced before. And we have to recognize some of the legacy that exists in all of our working cultures, that is about permission, that is about hierarchy, and not being used to having that freedom. And I love that. It's okay. It's okay to do this, and really keeping that alive in a hybrid world is going to be so important, that people need permission to be able to really empower themselves, step into their own space and have that sense of agency and choose how they work in a way that still meets the demands of their job. But actually, for a lot of organizations, it's got to be explicit, because otherwise people aren't going to make the most of some of those benefits that are there. Absolutely. A lot of what we're talking about, Monica, is around how do leaders really develop the skills, the ways of being, and what do they role model that make things more inclusive, that really create an environment that brings the best out of everyone and is supportive and looks after them. As a D&I and wellbeing specialist, I'd love to get your perspective on the role of leaders as we move forward, and what you think is the most important things to develop within them.
Oh gosh, so leaders set the tone. Whatever they do, everybody follows. So I feel for them. I think there must be a lot of pressure to always act in a way that is inspiring, that you get people to do what they have to do on time, to take care of everybody. It's a hard job. So I bow to them, and I really respect those leaders who take this very seriously. It's a privilege, but also a responsibility to be in this position. Yeah, besides the role modeling bit, I think they also need to make sure that they trust their employees in this new remote working environment or hybrid working environment. And people need to feel like they're trusted, so they need to communicate that very clearly, and make sure that they take care of themselves. That self-care is really important. I was actually listening to a panel a few weeks ago, and they were giving the example of this leader who was feeling really, really sick, and yet he was visibly sick, and yet he still showed up in a Zoom call. And then the question is, what kind of message does he send to his colleagues and to the people that he's managing? Well, the message is, no matter where you are, how you're feeling, you have to show up. And probably from his side, he was thinking, oh, I actually want to be there for my team. I want to give them the direction that they need and the support that they need. But probably if he actually took the time to take care of himself, that would have had a better consequence for the rest of the team, and would have created a better environment for them. So I think taking care of yourself is really important, and encouraging others to take care of themselves as well. I think that's crucial moving forward.
Leaders need to be that beacon, that role model for putting well-being at the heart of the culture and actually following through on what firms are saying. So a lot of people are saying it, but if that's not lived, that's not breathed, that's not demonstrated by leaders, people won't trust that actually the well-being of the employees is at the heart of the strategy and is at the heart of what matters to the organization. So I think you're completely right. There's that risk with presenteeism that maybe I wouldn't want to get on the tube and go into the office if I was ill, pass it to everyone, but hey, I'm going to struggle through. And it's about, are we valuing ourselves and our well-being? And as leaders, are we showing that too? Absolutely. You touched upon trust there, and as Laura had said, we've had a great question around trust come through. And I know, Nathalie, that trust is something that Publicis have been looking at for some time. How do we have trust really sort of built into our culture? And I think the question we have here is, how have you addressed the issue of trust with leaders and managers as sort of shifting through remote working, but now starting to look at what's next? How are you doing that at Publicis?
Yeah, so I think for us, trust is actually equally as important for our people than for our clients. So we are a matrix organization, so trust is key. Everything is being done through the network, through connections. So if people don't trust you, they're not going to be working with you. And then it's an issue because everything is so interconnected. So trust is super important internally, but then obviously also with clients, because that's our business. We should be trusted advisors for our clients. So building trust with them is also super important. So I think for us, trust is really about over communication. You know how they often say that, actually in English, I don't even know how to say it, but that phrase, how a cobbler shoes or something, like basically our business is communication, yet we might be struggling with communicating in some parts of our business. That was maybe a bit of our weakness before the pandemic, but we really again made a conscious effort when everything started being so ambiguous and full of anxiety. So we really tried to over communicate. All of our CEOs in every market have started sending newsletter. So not coming from the internal communication department, but actually coming from them. They would send like very personal notes to everyone in the office, like twice a week actually. So for us, it was about that over communication. It was that was our way, but there is still our way of how do we help build trust, and how do we help build trust in the company. Even our CEO at the global level, Arthur, who's overseeing 80,000 people, he's also always doing Q&As with our people, Q&As with different regions. So we really put a lot of efforts on communication this year. So that has been our biggest weapon.
So important, because trust is a human-to-human thing. It only exists between people. It doesn't exist in a policy, in a paper. It's actually about that human connection. And I think, I've been personally trying to communicate about 3 times more than normal and when working virtually. And I think that will continue in the hybrid world. Absolutely. Laura, what would you add to that around building trust at Sopra Steria?
I think just one addition I would say to that is I think that trust is built through connections, and actually as leaders, encouraging our leaders that actually when they're, and we had actually a session on this yesterday, I think actually, Jill, in an event that I was part of, and I know Jill, you were there as well, but it's not checking up on somebody, it's checking in on somebody. And actually perhaps what you're having when you talk to your people is you're not talking about work, you're not talking about business, you're not talking about the SLAs or whatever it is that they need to achieve, but you are genuinely doing that. Are you okay? How's everything going? Conversations. And I think to support that comes the training. So for example, we ran our iLead program last year that really supported our leaders in having those sort of conversations, because some leaders are fantastic at having those conversations where people might not be okay or people want to share feelings and others are not, so actually I think it's really important to make sure your leaders have got the support to do that. But I think on the trust aspect and making people feel like they're trusted, it's about building that connection and that more of a human connection, maybe, I think really supports that.
Absolutely. That fine line between checking up and checking in is a fine line, and it comes down to the tone, the intention that a leader has, the words they're using, the time, the space they're giving it, and are they really listening, and have they really learned how to genuinely listen and show they care. And I think just that word, the event you're talking about yesterday, you know, the care that your senior leadership team showed for people in that I was so privileged to see, is so important for building that trust. Absolutely. Yeah, such a crucial thing. Got a great question here, which is something that I've been thinking about a lot over the recent weeks and months. And it is, what are the challenges of hybrid working that are additional to remote working? We'll come to you first with that one, Monica.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is that us versus them sort of situation, where you have the people in the office versus the people who are working from home. And how do you make sure that the people that are working from home don't somehow feel neglected and forgotten when you're having a meeting, for instance? So I think when you're having a meeting, I think one of the easiest things that you can do is to make sure that you don't have all the people who are in the office in one room around one laptop, and then all the other people, because like visually you already have an us versus them sort of situation. So it's about being very intentional about how you create a good inclusive meeting, and always making sure that the people who are in the background are not sort of forgotten. So start asking them, for instance, the people who are online, what do you think about this? Or what are your thoughts on this, before then going back to the rest of the room. And then I think the other thing that may happen is when some people are in a different space, unconscious bias sort of comes in very easily and can sneak up on us. And we might feel like we are creating a better or stronger bond with the people who are in the office versus the other people. So we have to be very intentional all the time and make sure that there are opportunities for everybody to come together as well.
I love that. The practical advice in terms of meetings is making sure that if everyone's in the group is together, that they're not all clustered around and it feels like the others are excluded, but actually maybe if they're all in the office, they're joining virtually as well, starting by asking opinions of people who are virtual rather than with the main group if they are in the office. I love those really practical things. What practical advice would you have about overcoming that risk of unconscious bias and feeling closer, having more bonds with people who are in the office with you? Because I've read a lot of studies that say one of the risks that come with this is around promotion and progression, that people will be missed out, they'll be forgotten about if they're not someone who's regularly choosing to come into the office. And I emphasize the word choosing there. How do we overcome that? I'll come back to you with that one, Monica.
So I think one of the ways is just to make sure that there are those regular checkups and those opportunities for people to do come together. So make sure that you have regular team meetings where everybody actually is there. And also think about those social activities that you can create for people. So for me, the office is the space where you collaborate, but also where you bond with people. And you can have, for instance, all sorts of fun activities, panel discussions, those workshops that are a bit more practical, movie nights. We had all sorts of fun things when I was at the Royal Academy of Engineering back when we were in the office. Sorry, I just had a big thing on my screen now. Yeah, so. And also, make sure that you train your leaders as well on unconscious bias and get them to, when there is an interview, for instance, make sure that they have that refresh on unconscious bias and get them to think about how unconscious bias, which can be affected by not seeing somebody all the time, can impact their decision-making and their selection processes. And then the other thing is I think we need to really move from this idea of presenteeism and think more about results. So promotions should be based on results, not on how many hours somebody sits on the chair next to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think it's so important. Yeah, thinking about the results, the evidence, and that really is coming through there. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. We're just launching a bit of a poll here. We're keen to hear, as we're talking about all of these important building blocks for the future of hybrid working, what do you think is most important? You know, we've been talking a lot about leadership, culture, and purpose. Is that the most crucial thing? Or things that we've touched upon, haven't gone into great depth on, such as systems and spaces. Nathalie talked about, you know, really using the office space the best of our abilities. Structure, roles. We've talked a bit about communication and ways of working as well. So we'll leave that running in the background as we continue the conversation, and do let us know which you think are the most important, and we'll come back to those results shortly. But going back to that question of the additional challenges of hybrid working, I think we've really uncovered one there around inclusion, bias, keeping this as a fair and level playing field. Nathalie, what else do you see as anything that might be additional, a challenge that might be ahead, risk that might be coming that we haven't really thought about yet?
Risk in hybrid working, you're saying?
Yeah, hybrid working, or just this next chapter of working as you try and bring people back to the office at Publicis.
Yeah, so I think for us, it could be about the anxiety about the return to work, because we do have some people that are excited to be, you know, looking forward to going back to the office, and some that are actually feeling very comfortable with, you know, the environment that they have built in the past year. So how do we balance that? I think that's based on the course that I've been on with leaders, that's what people are starting to be thinking about. And the way that we are approaching this is we don't want to be the kind of company that is going to say, all right, now everyone, let's get back to the office, and it's going to be like 60%. Like, it's never going to be really that clear cut at Publicis. It's always going to be a bit more fluid and organic. But that being said, I think we still need to have some kind of, you know, general guidelines with regards to how this is going to work. And we want people to be excited to come back to work. That's basically our line. So I've seen a lot of markets, especially the UK, actually putting a lot of efforts into creating some like fun contests, like fun office contests, or you know, creating stories of people that are back in the office and like they are reporting back on what happened. So almost tapping into that FOMO, you know, that everyone might have, like, oh my God, I'm missing out, you know, there seems to be a nice party going on in the office, like I want to be part of that. So that's the stance that we are taking. So trying to come up with the positive, and hopefully you know, people will have FOMO and will want to come back to the office.
I'm getting a bit of FOMO. I'm thinking, oh, if there's a party going on, I'm coming to your offices. Absolutely. We've missed so much fun, so much lightness, so much chance to play together and just have a great time together over the last year, both professionally and personally, that really drawing on that, particularly knowing that you have quite a strongly millennial population in some of your offices. That's going to be a big pull when they're at a chapter in their life that, and the generation that comes after millennial, which I forget which one's which, that is really about forming new social bonds. And I think that will be so important. I love what you're saying around using storytelling to help move beyond the anxiety, but actually help create that image of the office as being safe, as being fun, inclusive, as going to be enriching for you. And I think, you know, we were talking about leader skills earlier. I think the ability to tell stories, to help people make meaning and shift their perspective a bit through storytelling, through examples, will really be so important for helping reduce that anxiety and how people are feeling about the risks that it might pose to them. Absolutely. Yeah. And what about at Sopra Steria, Laura? Either on this topic of return to work anxiety or some of the risks that might pop up later down the line. What are you exploring?
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, I mean, we're not moving to this model until June time. I think that's what a lot of other organizations are doing as well. And I do honestly think that we may not know all the risks or challenges at this point. I mean, I think if we look back to last year, we discovered some of those as we went and we dealt with them as we went. So I think the first thing I would say is no one, I think, has got all of the answers, and no one's got a crystal ball to know exactly how this is going to go. We have, and our CEO describes it as the biggest change program that we've ever been through as a business in terms of our future of work program. And I guess to give you an indication of what our key focus areas are, there's 4 areas. So wellbeing, performance, collaboration, and workspaces and places. So we have a huge team of people who are focused on what exactly that looks like, uncovering those challenges, those risks, and really thinking about how we move forward through to this sort of future of work. So those are definitely top on our agenda to think about. But honestly, do we know all of the risks or challenges at this point? I would say probably not. I think the other piece to mention as well, and I think this has been mentioned already in the discussion, we won't be reopening all of our offices. We don't need the real estate that we had previously. So that's a challenge in itself. I think for some of our employees, knowing that actually they're never going to go back to the office that they left last March, and actually supporting them through that as well, and dealing with that in a really sort of empathetic way, and making sure that we're cognizant of that and helping people through it, because that's quite a change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And I think, as you're saying, it's this continual willingness to listen, to learn, to be open, to support as we go through all this. We've just had a really lovely comment shared from an attendee in Australia who said, we've been given notice to return to work. We're not all returning at the same pace or on the same days. We're checking in on each other. It's a large company, but it's been a really sensitive approach. Fortunately, the company is still checking in with individuals, but people are still nervous.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, that it is natural. There is going to be nervous. There's a little bit more anxiety than before. So we will really see that. But actually, everything that we've been talking about this afternoon around this human-centric approach to leadership, and I use the word leadership meaning everybody, everyone in an organization is a leader in some way. We can all really take that sensitive approach that our guest has just shared with me there. I think that's really, really great to hear. It's interesting as we look at the results of our poll, leadership, culture and purpose coming through very strongly. 79% of people thinking these are the building blocks. And I know there's 3 building blocks in there, so we're a bit cheeky putting them in one group. But ways of working coming through second at 30%. And we had a very specific question that's come through in the chat around the conversation we were having earlier around connection, communication. Bringing people together is a big theme of this. And just, have you found technology that's been really effective for this, or other ways of working that you've found during the last 12 months that you think will be vital and important for keeping connection, communication alive as we move forward? Has anyone had any success stories with technology or other forms of communication?
No, I mean, I think we've had a few false starts, if I'm being honest with you. We've tried things, they haven't quite worked, so we've changed direction. I think we use Teams as a business. I don't know if anyone else uses Teams, but I think that, we quickly realized that actually there was different Teams, generations or versions available, and actually would enable us to have more technology, breakout rooms, subtitling, things that actually were really important. So I think we were just making sure we were using the technology for the best. I think it's not necessarily a technology, but we've definitely, in terms of found an effective approach in terms of communication, is to hear a lot more from our senior leaders. They've been so much more prevalent in all the comms that we've been doing, and the opportunities that we provided for people to talk directly to our leadership as well from a communication technique has been so important for us over this period. That's something that's definitely changed for us over the course of the last sort of 12 months.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anyone have anything else they would add in there?
I would just add, yes, we also use Microsoft Teams and Zoom and other tools as well. But just wanted to say that from a D&I perspective, using Microsoft Teams and Zoom and tools like that, it gives people an opportunity to participate in a meeting in a way that maybe in the past they wouldn't have, because now we have the chat option. So if you're a bit shy, or if you're a bit more introvert and you don't want to say something out loud in a meeting, then you can just say it in the chat and still have a chance to contribute, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know for a lot of introverted leaders who I coach, they say they love that they're finding their voices being heard actually more by using these technologies, and it's really drawing them in. Whereas sitting in a meeting with 12 other people face to face, they clam up a little bit more. And it's actually about, okay, there's so many different ways to put your voice forward now. So I'm loving that. Absolutely. Yeah. We've only got a few minutes left, so if anyone has any burning questions, do send them in. We've got several that we probably won't get to, but if there's something you're dying to ask, send it in now and we will get it answered after the session. But one thing I wanted to touch upon is sort of our final point before we close is links with a lot of what we're talking about and a bit about ways of working, but it's around how do we make sure that we overcome what I'm considering as like the second pandemic that we've seen recently? And I don't mean that to trivialize the actual real pandemic, but the overwork that so many people are experiencing. We are seeing that people are working 50%, 60% more in terms of hours because, hey, we're at home, we're working from home and nothing's open. We can't do anything in many parts of the world. So the day has spread and the level of work that we're contributing to is increasing, and people are getting burnt out. How do we make sure that we don't just transfer this overwork culture that we maybe have in many cultures and societies to a hybrid model, to a return to the office? And Monica, I'll come to you in your role as a wellbeing lead on this one first.
So I think you raise a really good point. Now there's basically no boundary between your personal life and your work life. We just roll out of the bed to our desk. So it's challenging, and I think yes, moving forward, we will have to deal with the burnout epidemic basically. What we are doing at Lloyds is basically make sure that we upskill our colleagues through a lot of trainings. FeelGoodCo is actually one of our providers. So we just equip people with the basics of what they need to take care of themselves and create those boundaries, because we can't create those boundaries from themselves. You need at 5 o'clock, you need to turn off your computer and like move away from it. And then it's also encouraging and having our leaders encouraging their employees to do that as well. Because if you don't hear that message from the top, it's going to be hard to do it yourself.
Absolutely. Hear that message as a leader. Step in and make the changes that you can to reduce some of that pressure. Give people the permission in certain things that good enough is okay in some priorities. Nothing has to be perfect. And role model, as you say. Absolutely. Yeah. Laura, Nathalie, either one of you want to quickly add anything there in terms of this risk of overwork and how we just don't transplant things that weren't working for us into a new future of work?
I mean, the only thing I would add just on that is we've established what we call Wellbeing Wednesdays. So every single Wednesday, all of our business have a communication which focuses exactly on that wellbeing. And our topics most recently have been burnout, setting boundaries, sort of blurring lines, how to deal with that, workload. And then actually what we do is we direct people through then all of the channels that we've got available to support them, whether that's our EAP, our employee assistance program, whether that's videos that they can find online, further learning. We've been hosting webinars, etc. So just don't ignore it. Actually make sure that you're consciously doing something about it and giving access to your employees to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Nathalie, anything to add? You looked as though you had something you wanted to add there. I'll give you that chance.
No, I mean, we are doing lots of education around that. So we have a couple of resilience workshops happening in many different markets. And I think it's also a lot about mindfulness, just being mindful of that changes basically in our lives and in our professional world. So we're trying to educate people about that so that they are more aware that those boundaries need to be taken care of so that they don't burn out. And obviously mental health, as Laura was saying, is such an important topic. Every of our local market is picking it up differently. So I don't have like a global, I guess, program to share, but each local market has at least one thing happening in mental health because it is so important.
Yeah. And I would really just encourage all organizations to keep that front of mind. Yes, we're all excited about what's next, because who wants to live through a pandemic anymore? Definitely not me. But actually, we are still in recovery. And we've got to recognize that just because some of the things that were challenges to our mental health have gone away, others haven't. And there is the recovery period that is needed. We might not have the energy or the mental health to really go all in for everything. We've actually got to be really sensitive to that. Absolutely. So it's great to hear what you're saying, and about making it really obvious to people. I know that if I see advert for chocolate several times, I will want that chocolate bar. And it's the same thing with wellbeing. It's if you let people know what solutions are available, even if they're not taking them immediately, they will eventually. And at the point that they need them, they will remember it. So it's about really flooding them with those cues that will help them know what is available to them. Absolutely. That's such a great conversation here, and I can see from some of the comments that come in that there's lots that you're all doing in this space as well. Great to hear about how people have been using technology to have meetings in 15 languages as an example, to make the most of all of this and make sure that we're building really inclusive cultures as we work remotely and transition into whatever's next. And that's going to look different for all of us. So thank you so much to my three wonderful panelists, Monica, Natalie, and Laura. Lots of great insight, and thank you for sharing so openly what you're doing in your organizations. I know it's inspired lots of us this morning. Feel Good, we're here to support you as well. We have our Sharpen Your Edge program that addresses employee well-being, and a lot of the things we've just finished the conversation with there. Our Future Now program is designed to develop all of those human-centric leadership skills and capabilities that we've been talking about today, from the ability to put well-being at the heart of a team culture through to compassion and empathy and listening skills. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment as well in terms of helping people really create a roadmap for their culture, build on the things that are really strong in their culture, and think about what that looks like in a new environment, whilst putting people well-being much more at the heart. So do get in touch with us if there's anything we can help you with. And also, we know that a lot of you get so much from these peer conversations. So we will be hosting smaller, more intimate roundtable conversations where small groups of us will get together and go really into depth on some of the topics we've talked about today, from inclusion to building trust in organizations, to developing leaders, to overcoming burnout. So if you're interested in that, look out, we'll be in touch, and there'll be lots on social media around that as well. And we'll also make sure any unanswered questions today, we start a conversation with those on LinkedIn. So share your perspectives and look out for those posts in coming days and weeks as well. So thank you again to our wonderful panel, and it's great to have you all here. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.